Hello, I'm Zachary May, and this is Faith, Reason, and the Things Between, a series on the great books of Western civilization. Today we are going to start our series on the Histories by Herodotus. In these videos you will learn everything you need to know about this book in order to understand why Herodotus' work was so groundbreaking and significant for Western civilization, why the events themselves that he writes about completely changed the course of history, also what lessons we can learn from the events and themes that are inherent in the book, as well as Herodotus' method, his method of inquiry and of narrative structure, and what that can teach us. And as always, we are also deeply concerned with what in this book is connected to the universal questions. What is human nature, the nature of the divine, how they relate, and the meaning of life. You'll also learn how this book connects to other great books of Western civilization, and, because of all this, why this book is one of the great books of Western civilization, in the hopes that its contents may not be erased by time. The Histories is significant for many reasons, and I will try not to exhaust them all here. The first I'll speak about is Herodotus himself. He is one of the most profound thinkers in the Western world's history. He's known as the father of history, that is, the first historian. But even the first historian has to have a philosophy of history, ideas about history that inform what they pay attention to, write about, leave out, or why. That begins with the recognition of a narrative. Carolyn DeWald, who writes the introduction to my copy of Herodotus, and who I got to interview at length, says that Herodotus is the first to see the many stories of the past as parts of a whole story. In trying to tell the story of the Persian Wars and how they came to happen, he discovers many causes, large and small, spanning across the known world and stretching back for generations. Nobody had thought like this before, not about human events, just about divine or mythological ones. And in those, the gods are chiefly responsible for causing events. We, too, recognize such a narrative if we are studying the great books. The story told by Herodotus is itself part of a much larger story, preceded by Homer, let's say, and followed by Thucydides and Plato. So, to investigate all of these causes of the Persian Wars, which is the main subject matter of the book, Herodotus takes an epic journey. He travels widely throughout the Eastern European world, visits as many different peoples as he can, and asks all of them for their accounts of the various events and stories that make up the histories. Or, in the words of Homer, many cities of men he saw, and learned their minds. Herodotus reports all of the stories that he is told, those he believes and those that he doesn't, and he'll tell you which is which. As he does so, though, he almost always says where the information is coming from, if there are other informants who tell the story differently, whether he has outside information, proving or disproving certain details of the story, and his own opinion as well. As objective as he is in this way, however, he is not completely hands-off. DeWald writes that the initial selection of stories, the pacing, the structuring, and much in the literary presentation reveal Herodotus' own interests, values, and gifts as a narrator. He has gathered an enormous amount of information, but he is the one who decides what parts to tell, where, and how. In my view, this is not cause to question his stories as lacking context, but is rather a testament to his incredible work in reconstructing the causes of the Persian Wars down to such fine detail. Herodotus does not claim that he or any of his informants have the truth for certain. Instead, he investigates, asks questions, and pursues the truth by gathering many different accounts from many different people that he encounters. This investigation and inquiry into the causes and effects of human events gave rise to what is called history today. The events covered within the histories are tremendously important to the development of ideas and of human history in general. The Greeks' victory over the Persians was the beginning of what would come to be known as the Greek Enlightenment, or the Athenian Cultural Revolution of the 5th century BC. Athens would rise to great prominence, largely because of its role in the war against Persia, and out of that time came many of the most influential ideas of Western civilization. One of the most important ones of these, the most seminal idea of these, was how to think critically and rationally about the world, about one's society, one's traditions, and beliefs. This is also called the spirit of inquiry, or the Logos. Hutchins, the editor-in-chief of the first set of the great books of the Western world back in the 50s, points to this idea, inquiry, discourse, dialogue, debate, and exchange of ideas, as the primary idea that animates Western civilization. DeWald writes, "It is not overstating the case to say that it also changed the course of Western civilization. We owe to this remarkable period many of our most basic ideas about democracy, about the importance of the individual, the importance of rational political discourse, about how we think education works and what it is for, as well as many of our basic genres of literary expression: drama, philosophy, rhetoric, and history. Yes, Herodotus himself was a product of this time period. So was Socrates. Had the Persians succeeded in conquering Greece, all of these thinkers, and perhaps many of those that would have come after, would have lived as subjects, or really, as we'll see, slaves of the king rather than free men. How do you imagine the inquisitive, critical, and rational spirit thriving under a regime where, as we will see, the king of Persia can do no wrong, and his power is both feared and worshipped? It wouldn't. A professor of mine once said that had the Persians won this war, the Greco-Roman knowledge that fueled the Renaissance would not have been available. In my view, that is probably the most conservative estimate one could make of it. Perhaps you find that hard to believe. Fair enough. Cormac McCarthy once wrote, convincingly, that there are no control groups in history. And this is true. We cannot precisely or certainly say what would have been or could have been. However, I believe Herodotus' account gives us a lot of evidence that the ideas of freedom, democracy, free speech, truth, inquiry, and human rights, critical to our world today, were all on the line in this war, and that they were being marched against by slavery and totalitarianism. Herodotus had one of the most profoundly original thoughts about human events in the Western world, applied the spirit of critical inquiry to that idea in order to ensure the utmost intellectual rigor within it, and then applied it to the investigation of events that most certainly shaped the world as we know it today. He literally, figuratively, and ultimately made history. One other thing, if you want to read the Histories, but you're a little bit intimidated by its length, and you want to actually read it without just watching my videos, I have made a study guide, or a reading guide really, just for you. It tells you what parts you have to read to get the main story, what parts you can skip, and it tells you what happened in the parts that you skipped. I've made this available on Etsy, and you can find the link to it below.